Okay, now we come to another sutta, 78. Samanamandika Sutta, Samanamandika Putta. Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. Now on that occasion the wanderer Ugaha Mana Samanamandika Putta was staying in Malika's park, the single hall Tinduka plantation for philosophical debates, together with a large following of wanderers, with as many as 300 wanderers. The carpenter Panchakanga went out from Savatthi at midday in order to see the Blessed One. And he thought, it is not the right time to see the Blessed One. He is still in retreat. And it is not the right time to see monks worthy of esteem. They are still in retreat. Suppose I went to Malika's park to the wanderer Ugaha Mana Samanamandika Putta. And he went to Malika's park. On that occasion, the wanderer Ugaha Mana was seated with a large assembly of wanderers who were making an uproar, loudly and noisily talking many kinds of pointless talk, such as talk of kings, etc. The wanderer Ugaha Mana Samanamandika Putta saw the carpenter Panchakanga coming in the distance. Seeing him, he quieted his own assembly thus, Sirs, be quiet. Sirs, make no noise. Here comes the carpenter Panchakanga, a disciple of the recluse Gotama, one of the recluse Gotama's white cloth lay disciples staying at Savatthi. These venerable ones like quiet. They are disciplined in quiet. They commend quiet. Perhaps if he finds our assembly a quiet one, he will think to join us. Then the wanderers became silent. Stop here for a moment. So you can see from here that these external ascetics, they not only have great respect for the Buddha's monk and nun disciples, even the Buddha's lay disciples, they have respect. And they think that somebody like this carpenter Panchakanga, he can teach them some Dhamma, so they want him to come. So they kept quiet. The carpenter Panchakanga went to the wanderer Ugaha Mana and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he sat down at one side. The wanderer Ugaha Mana then said to him, Carpenter, when a man possesses 4 qualities, I describe him as accomplished in what is wholesome, perfected in what is wholesome, attained to the supreme attainment, and ascetic invincible. What are the 4? Here he does no evil bodily actions. He utters no evil speech. He has no evil intentions, and he does not make his living by any evil livelihood. When a man possesses these 4 qualities, I describe him as accomplished in what is wholesome, perfected in what is wholesome, attained to the supreme attainment, and ascetic invincible. Stop here for a moment. So this time, instead of trying to learn some Dhamma, here he's trying to show off. He knows some Dhamma also. He's trying to teach this Panchakanga what he knows. He says, if a person possesses 4 things, then he says this person is perfected. And what are these 4 things? He does no evil bodily actions. He utters no evil speech. He has no evil intentions and does not make his living by any evil livelihood. Then the carpenter Panchakanga neither approved nor disapproved of the wanderer Ugaha Mana's words. Without doing either, he rose from his seat and went away, thinking, I shall learn the meaning of this statement in the presence of the Blessed One. Then he went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, he sat down at one side and reported to the Blessed One his entire conversation with the wanderer Ugaha Mana. Thereupon the Blessed One said, If that were so, carpenter, then a young tender infant lying prone is accomplished in what is wholesome, perfected in what is wholesome, attained to the supreme attainment, and ascetic invincible, according to the wanderer Ugaha Mana's statement. For a young tender infant lying prone does not even have the notion body, so how should he do an evil action beyond mere wriggling? A young tender infant lying prone does not even have the notion speech, so how should he utter evil speech beyond mere whining? A young tender infant lying prone does not even have the notion intention, so how should he have evil intentions beyond mere sulking? A young tender infant lying prone does not even have the notion livelihood, so how should he make his living by evil livelihood beyond being suckled at his mother's breast? If that were so, carpenter, then a young tender infant lying prone is accomplished in what is wholesome, perfected in what is wholesome, attained to the supreme attainment, and ascetic invincible. according to the Wanderer Ugaha Mana's statement. When a man possesses 4 qualities, carpenter, I describe him not as accomplished in what is wholesome, or perfected in what is wholesome, or attained to the supreme attainment, or an ascetic invincible, but as one who stands in the same category as the young tender infant lying prone. What are the 4? Here he does no evil bodily actions, he utters no evil speech, he has no evil intentions, and he does not make his living by any evil livelihood. When a man possesses these 4 qualities, I describe him not as accomplished, etc., but as one who stands in the same category as the young tender infant lying prone. I'll stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha immediately demolished this Ugaha Mana's statement by saying, if you talk about these 4 qualities, then this young tender infant possesses these four qualities. So this person who possesses these 4 qualities, he is not a person who has attained to the supreme attainment, but he is in the same category as a baby. When a man possesses 10 qualities, carpenter, I describe him as accomplished in what is wholesome, perfected in what is wholesome, attained to the supreme attainment, and ascetic invincible. But first of all, I say, it must be understood thus. These are unwholesome habits, and thus unwholesome habits originate from this, and thus unwholesome habits cease without remainder here, and thus one practicing in this way is practicing the way to the cessation of unwholesome habits. And I say it must be understood thus, these are wholesome habits, and thus wholesome habits originate from this, and thus wholesome habits cease without remainder here, and thus one practicing in this way is practicing the way to the cessation of wholesome habits. And I say it must be understood thus, these are unwholesome thoughts, and thus unwholesome thoughts originate from this, and thus unwholesome thoughts cease without remainder here. And thus one practicing in this way is practicing to the way to the cessation of unwholesome thoughts. And I say it must be understood thus, these are wholesome thoughts, and thus wholesome thoughts originate from this, and thus wholesome thoughts cease without remainder here. And thus one practicing in this way is practicing the way to the cessation of wholesome thoughts. What are unwholesome habits? They are unwholesome bodily actions, unwholesome verbal actions, and evil livelihood. These are called unwholesome habits. And what do these unwholesome habits originate from? Their origin is stated. They should be said to originate from mind. What mind? Though mind is multiple, varied, and of different aspects, there is mind affected by lust, by hate, and by delusion. Unwholesome habits originate from this. Let's stop here for a moment. So here is interesting. One of the few places where the Buddha mentions mind is multiple, varied, and of different aspects. But here, unwholesome habits originate from the mind which is affected by lust, hatred, and delusion. And where do these unwholesome habits cease without remainder? The cessation is stated. Here a monk abandons bodily misconduct and develops good bodily conduct. He abandons verbal misconduct and develops good verbal conduct. He abandons mental misconduct and develops good mental conduct. He abandons wrong livelihood and gains a living by right livelihood. It is here that unwholesome habits cease without remainder. And how practicing does he practice the way to the cessation of unwholesome habits? Here a monk awakens zeal for the non-arising of unarisen, even unwholesome states, and he makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind and strives. He awakens zeal for the abandoning of arisen, evil, unwholesome states. He awakens zeal for the arising of unarisen, wholesome states. He awakens zeal for the continuance, non-disappearance, strengthening, increase, fulfillment by development of arisen, wholesome states. And he makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind and strives. One so practices the way to the cessation of unwholesome habits. Let's stop here for a moment. This last paragraph is very important. This is about the 4 samapadanas, 4 right efforts. When we practice the spiritual path, we must continually look into our mind, whether they are unwholesome states or wholesome states. we should develop unwholesome states. When unwholesome states arise and give us suffering, we should immediately throw it out. Don't entertain it. If you entertain it, you're not putting effort in the right way. A lot of people, they think the spiritual path is attaining this jhana and that jhana, or some people think it's attaining this jnana and that jnana if they are practicing vipassana. But basically, the spiritual path is these 4 right efforts to get rid of unwholesome states of mind and develop wholesome states. Then in that way, we change our character. Otherwise, you cannot change your character. So if you want to change our character, especially if you want to be reborn in heaven, you got to change your character until you have the character of a deva or a devi. What are wholesome habits? They are wholesome bodily actions, wholesome verbal actions, and purification of livelihood. These are called wholesome habits. And what do these wholesome habits originate from? Their origin is stated. They should be said to originate from mind. What mind? Though mind is multiple, varied, and of different aspects, there is mind unaffected by lust, by hate, or by delusion. Wholesome habits originate from this. And where do these wholesome habits cease without remainder? Their cessation is stated. Here a monk is virtuous, but he does not identify with his virtue. And he understands as it actually is that liberation by mind and liberation by wisdom, where these wholesome habits cease without remainder. Stop here for a moment. This part also is quite interesting. A monk is virtuous, but he does not identify with his virtue. In other words, if a monk is practicing the holy path, he must always be careful about the ego. Sometimes somebody new on the path, when you are virtuous, you become egoistic. You look down on others who are not so virtuous, whose precepts are not so pure as you. So that's why here the Buddha says, you should not identify yourself with your virtue. And how practicing does he practice the way to the cessation of wholesome habits? Here a monk awakens zeal for the non-arising of unarisen evil wholesome states, for the continuance, non-disappearance, strengthening, increase and fulfillment by development of arisen wholesome states. And he makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind and strives. One so practices the way to the cessation of wholesome habits. So this is again practicing the 4 right efforts. What are unwholesome thoughts? They are the thought of sensual desire, the thought of ill will, the thought of cruelty. These are called unwholesome thoughts. And what do these unwholesome thoughts originate from? Their origin is stated. They should be said to originate from perception. What perception? Though perception is multiple, varied, and of different aspects, there is perception of sensual desire, perception of ill will, and perception of cruelty. Unwholesome thoughts originate from this. And where do these unwholesome thoughts cease without remainder? The cessation is stated here. Here, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, a monk enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of seclusion. It is here that unwholesome thoughts cease without remainder. I'll stop here for a moment. So in the first jhana, what little thoughts remains is only wholesome thoughts, thoughts connected with your meditation. You are not thinking of any unwholesome thoughts. The mind is quite controlled in the first jhana. And how practicing does he practice the way to the cessation of unwholesome thoughts? Here a monk awakens zeal for the non-arising of unarisen evil unwholesome states, for the continuance, etc. So these are the 4 right efforts again. He makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind and strives. One so practices the way to the cessation of unwholesome thoughts. What are wholesome thoughts? They are the thought of renunciation, the thought of non-ill will, and the thought of non-cruelty. These are called wholesome thoughts. And what do these wholesome thoughts originate from? Their origin is stated. They should be said to originate from perception. What perception? Though perception is multiple, varied, and of different aspects, there is perception of renunciation, perception of non-ill will, and perception of non-cruelty. Wholesome intentions originate from this. And where do these wholesome thoughts cease without remainder? the cessation is stated. Here with the stilling of applied and sustained thought, a monk enters upon and abides in the second jhana, which is self-confidence and singleness of mind, without applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of concentration. It is here that these wholesome thoughts cease without remainder. Stop here for a moment. In this second jhana, the mind becomes so concentrated that no thought can surface. And here this state of the second jhana sometimes is called the state of the Aryan silence, where there's no more, the mind stops thinking, no thoughts at all. It only experiences delight and pleasure. And how practicing does he practice the way to the cessation of wholesome thoughts? Here among awakened zeal for the non-arising of unarisen evil unwholesome states, etc., etc. He makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind and strives. One so practices the way to the cessation of wholesome thoughts. Now, carpenter, when a man possesses what 10 qualities do I describe him as accomplished in what is wholesome, perfected in what is wholesome, attained to the supreme attainment, and ascetic invincible. Here a monk possesses the right view of one beyond training, the right thoughts of one beyond training, the right speech of one beyond training, the right action of one beyond training, the right livelihood of one beyond training, the right effort of one beyond training, the right recollection of one beyond training, the right concentration of one beyond training, the right knowledge of one beyond training, and the right liberation of one beyond training. When a man possesses these 10 qualities, I describe him as accomplished in what is wholesome, perfected in what is wholesome, attained to the supreme attainment, and ascetic invincible. This is what the Blessed One said. The carpenter Panchakanga was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So here the last part, the Buddha says, the supreme attainment, this ascetic invincible possesses the noble eightfold path of the Arahant, the 8 factors of one beyond training. The one beyond training is the Arahant who has finished his work. And then the 9 and the 10 is knowledge of liberation and the liberation. So here, instead of the 4 qualities stated by Ugaha Mana, the Buddha mentions first you've got to understand what are wholesome habits and what are unwholesome habits, and how to practice the way to develop wholesome habits and to eliminate unwholesome habits. Also, what are wholesome thoughts and what are unwholesome thoughts, and how to develop wholesome thoughts and how to get rid of unwholesome thoughts. And practicing in this way, together with the other factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, then one can attain the enlightenment and becomes an ascetic invincible. That is a supreme attainment. Okay, we stop here for tonight. Nothing to discuss.
How to get insight and where to concentrate rather than we go out of it. I like to be inspired, but I would see that no better way to having the temple to take part in the number of temples that they have been to. And I compare with yogis who have to go to temple to just take themselves that there is a contribution to a lot of thoughts. They seem to be carrying themselves better than the yogis. So that is a mental habit or what the should really start with the progress. What should they be looking out for?
If they want to progress, they have to go to the best teacher in the world, and the best teacher in the world is the Buddha. Study the Buddha's words. There's so much practical instruction in the Buddha's words. Instead of getting instruction from the Arahant Sammasambuddha, a lot of people go to a lot of meditation monks and all that who are not who way below the Buddha standard. So the Buddha already said after he's gone, take the suttas and the Vinaya as our teacher. So if we look into the suttas, then only we can understand what is wholesome, what is unwholesome. So the spiritual path, a lot of people forget. It's not about attaining this and attaining that. It's about letting go, especially letting go of the ego and the temper, the temper that comes from the ego, and the jealousy and the backbiting and all these things. So if we practice correctly on the spiritual path, our ego should year by year reduce, become more and more humble. And whatever attainment you have, you don't boast, not like some people. They think they are Sotapanna, and then I heard of somebody trying to tell his friends that he's already attained Sotapanna because he's certified by his meditation teacher. And then when his friends didn't believe, he got angry. So always remember, it's a path of letting go, path of humility. So a lot of people, they because of worldly habits, in the worldly life, success is measured by how much you have, right? So in the same way, a lot of people come to the spiritual path. They think they have to attain this, attain that, and tell people they have attained this and attained that. But spiritual path is completely different. It's a path of letting go of the ego. Buddha says that we should be like a gong, a bell that is cracked. When a bell is cracked, you hit it, there's no sound. Not like a lot of people, they hit the bell gong very loud. Want everybody to know. Blow the trumpet very loud. So the best teacher is the Buddha, and we study the Buddha's words. We know how to practice correctly. No, actually these 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas, they are also can be said to be just the Noble Eightfold Path. So in the Noble Eightfold Path, the way to practice is mentioned by the Buddha, I think in the Sutta Majjhima Nikaya 117, that we have to start with right view. If you remember last year we went through the Samyutta Nikaya, and there under the Bojjhanga Samyutta, the Buddha says, first, even mentioned in some previous sutta we read, first you got to have faith in the teacher. And then when you have faith in the teacher, you draw close to him, associate with him, visit him frequently. Then after that, you show respect. When you show respect, then only you are worthy of teaching. Then the teacher will teach you the Dhamma. Then you listen to the Dhamma. Listening to the Dhamma under the Bojjhanga Samyutta is sati. That's how to practice sati. In the Bojjhanga Samyutta, is listening to the Dhamma is sati. And then after you listen to the Dhamma, then you reflect on it, and then you investigate it. That is Dhamma Vichaya. Dhamma Vichaya, another factor of the Bojjhangas. So this in the Noble Eightfold Path, the first factor we should develop is right view. And right view comes from listening to the Dhamma. And if your mind is clear enough, if you are intelligent enough, you have enough wisdom, when you listen to the Dhamma, then the Buddha says in some sutta we went through, you gain a reflective acceptance of the Dhamma. That means you reflect on what you have heard, the Dhamma, then you accept it. But that of course means you understand it. So when you understand the Dhamma and you accept it, you have already attained right view, and that brings you into the first path. You are the first path attainer. But then after that, you have to continue practicing. Listen to more Dhamma and try to meditate to sharpen your mind, get rid of the 5 hindrances. So in the same lifetime, the Buddha says the first path will turn to fruition, sotapanna, first fruit. So the first factor is right view, and then after right view, then right view will bring you into right thoughts. Once you have right view of the Dhamma, then you will start to think with right thoughts. And because of your right thoughts, you will start to speak. You have to have right speech. Because before you can speak, you must think first. Right? So your speech depends on your thought. So also your actions also depends on your thought. So when you have right thoughts, you will also naturally have right actions. And this right speech and right actions plus right thought will give you right livelihood. And then after that, as you progress, you want to improve your character, then you practice this right effort. Constantly watch your mind, get rid of unwholesome thoughts and develop wholesome thoughts. So that is right effort. And then after that, right sati. Right sati is to be mindful, not to let the mind wander out to worldly things. To constantly put your mind on 4 objects of sati, the nature of the body, your feelings, watch your feelings, and watch your mind, and recollect the Dhamma. So that is right sati. And then if you practice meditation, meditation in the Buddha's teachings is always samatha meditation, because remember Ananda was asked what type of meditation is praised by the Buddha. And remember Ananda said the first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. Only this is Buddhist meditation. So when you practice this meditation, that will bring you to the jhanas, the last factor. So the Noble Eightfold Path has to be practiced in that way. So same with this 37 Bodhipakya Dhamma. Okay, shall we end here?